The call came in just after 9 p.m. My friend is on the floor. There's blood everywhere. In a quiet Austin neighborhood, officers rushed to the scene. A modest home now turned into a nightmare. The victim was Anna Mariah Mo Wilson, a rising star in the world of professional cycling. She'd been in town for a race. She'd been with friends. She should have been safe. But within hours, her killer would vanish, sparking a hunt that crossed borders, twisted through jealousy, obsession, and betrayal. Where are you watching the video? Hit subscribe and like.
The first thing that struck officers when they stepped inside 1708 Maple Avenue was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping home, but a heavy, unnatural stillness that clung to the air. Minutes earlier, Austin's 911 lines had lit up with a frantic call. The voice on the other end belonged to Caitlin Cash, her words stumbling over each other as panic gripped her. She had left her home for dinner just a few hours earlier, leaving her guest, Anna Mariah Mo Wilson, alone. Mo, a 25-year-old rising star in the world of professional cycling, had flown in from San Francisco for an upcoming race. But when Caitlin returned, something felt off. The house seemed undisturbed until she stepped into the bathroom. Mo was lying on the tile floor, motionless. Blood pooled beneath her head, dark against her skin, with streaks smeared across her face and hair. Caitlin's voice shook as she tried to explain to the dispatcher what she was seeing. "She's not breathing. There's all over her face, the back of her head." The injury was devastating. Officers arriving on the scene knew instantly there was no saving her. A thin, clear fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, was leaking from the wound, a sign the bullets had pierced her skull with precision. At first glance, detectives considered a robbery gone wrong. Mo's $14,000 racing bike, her most prized possession, was missing from its usual spot inside the door. For someone of her caliber, that bike wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. But that theory quickly fell apart when a search of the nearby woods turned it up, abandoned in the brush. It was too neat, too easy. The placement felt deliberate, a diversion meant to send investigators chasing the wrong lead. Questioning Caitlin, detectives pieced together the evening's timeline. Around 5 p.m., Mo had gone swimming with a friend, Colin Strickland. Caitlin herself left for dinner at 5:30 and returned just after 9:15 to find Mo's body. There were no signs of forced entry, no witnesses to a struggle, and no neighbors who reported hearing gunshots. But security footage from homes nearby revealed something more sinister. Grainy images showed a black Jeep slowly approaching Caitlin's home that night, minutes before the murder. Then came the chilling audio from a Ring doorbell, 3 sharp cracks, unmistakably gunfire, followed by the faint echo of a woman's scream. Moments later, the Jeep rolled away into the dark. When officers traced the plates, they discovered the vehicle didn't belong to Colin, but to his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. By morning, detectives were certain. This wasn't random. This wasn't about a stolen bike. This was personal.
To understand how a promising young athlete ended up dead on a bathroom floor, detectives had to rewind the story, back months before the night of May 11, 2022. At the center were 3 people, whose lives had tangled in ways none of them could have predicted: Colin Strickland, Caitlin Armstrong, and Anna Mariah Mo Wilson. Colin Strickland was a well-known figure in the competitive cycling world, a man with a reputation for speed, charm, and a tight-knit circle of friends in Austin. In 2021, he was in a relationship with Caitlin Armstrong, a yoga instructor with an intense personality and habit of keeping a close eye on Colin's social life. Their romance, by most accounts, was passionate but volatile. They broke up in October of that year, and during that short separation, Colin met Mo. Mo was different, focused, driven, and a rising star in gravel racing. She and Colin began a brief romantic relationship during his split from Caitlin, but it didn't last. By November, Colin and Caitlin were back together, yet Colin didn't completely cut ties with Mo. They remained in touch, exchanging messages and occasionally meeting when their paths crossed in the cycling circuit. For Caitlin, that lingering connection was a festering wound. Friends would later say she grew increasingly suspicious, checking Colin's phone, questioning his whereabouts, and bristling at any mention of Mo's name. Colin himself admitted to police that he had changed Mo's name in his phone to avoid triggering Caitlin's jealousy, a quiet sign that he knew the situation was becoming dangerous. On the day of the murder, Mo had flown into Austin for a weekend race. Colin picked her up for a casual hangout, a swim at Deep Eddy Pool, followed by burgers at a local spot called Pool Burger. He told detectives the evening was innocent, just friends catching up, but he also admitted he hadn't told Caitlin about it. That secrecy would soon take on a darker meaning. As detectives pulled records and security footage, a troubling picture began to emerge. Colin and Mo's swim ended around 7:45 p.m., and Colin drove her back to Caitlin Cash's house where she was staying. What neither of them realized was that Caitlin was already in motion. Surveillance cameras caught a black Jeep Grand Cherokee, registered to Caitlin, driving in the same direction as Colin and Mo. At 8:36 p.m., Colin texted Caitlin to ask if she was still out getting food. She replied she was at a yoga class, but detectives would later find no proof of her being there. Her movements for the rest of that evening were a blank space in the timeline. What is known is this: minutes after Colin dropped Mo off, the black Jeep was seen in the alley behind Caitlin Cash's house. Moments later, a neighbor's doorbell camera recorded gunshots and a scream. When the Jeep pulled away into the darkness, Mo Wilson lay dying inside the house. The connection between Caitlin and Mo wasn't just professional jealousy. It was personal and rooted in the belief that Mo was a threat to Caitlin's relationship. Colin insisted to police that Caitlin had never spoken of harming Mo, but he also admitted their relationship had been strained and Caitlin could be intensely possessive. Possessive enough to kill? That was now the question driving the investigation, and when detectives looked at the weapon used, a 9mm pistol, they discovered something that made Caitlin's presence at the scene even harder to explain away. The model matched a gun Colin himself had purchased for Caitlin months earlier. Detectives now had motive, opportunity, and a weapon, but what they didn't have was Caitlin, because she was about to vanish. The morning after Mo Wilson's murder, Caitlin Armstrong still lived freely in Austin. Police knew her black Jeep had been seen at the crime scene, and they knew she owned a gun matching the murder weapon's caliber. But suspicion alone wasn't enough for an arrest. They needed something concrete. Then, a stroke of luck. A check of police databases revealed Caitlin had an outstanding warrant for a minor theft of service charge. It wasn't much, but it was enough to bring her in for questioning. Detectives used the warrant as a pretext, hoping to get her into an interview room and confront her about Mo's death. But when Caitlin arrived, they quickly realized the warrant had been issued in error. The date of birth didn't match. She wasn't under arrest, and she could leave whenever she wanted. Detectives tried to keep her talking. They told her her vehicle had been spotted near Mo's home and hinted at jealousy between her and the victim. Caitlin stayed calm but cautious, refusing to give details and repeatedly asking if she was free to leave. Then she asked for a lawyer, a request that legally ended any interrogation. Within minutes, Caitlin walked out the door. That would be the last time Austin police saw her in the city. Over the next few days, detectives turned to Colin Strickland again, hoping he might reveal something about Caitlin's state of mind. Colin brought a lawyer and told them he didn't believe Caitlin was capable of murder. But he also confirmed that the 9mm pistol police were investigating was a gun he'd purchased for her months earlier for self-defense. When ballistics tests came back, the shell casings found at the crime scene were a match for that weapon. It was enough for an arrest warrant, but by the time officers moved in, Caitlin Armstrong was gone. Investigators dug into her digital footprint and discovered she used a fraudulent passport belonging to her sister to board a one-way flight to Costa Rica. Surveillance footage from the Austin Bergstrom International Airport showed her at the gate, blending in with travelers, her expression unreadable. In Costa Rica, she didn't just hide, she transformed. Caitlin underwent cosmetic procedures, altering her nose and changing her hair, trying to make herself unrecognizable. She rented a room at a beachfront hostel in Santa Teresa, teaching yoga to tourists and keeping a low profile. For over a month, she was a ghost. Then, police set a trap. An undercover officer put out feelers for a yoga instructor in the area. Caitlin took the bait, responding to the offer. When she met the supposed client, her disguise failed her. Her eyes, the one feature she couldn't change, gave her away. She was arrested and flown back to the United States to face charges for Mo Wilson's murder. But Caitlin's story didn't end there. In October 2023, awaiting trial in Texas, she tried to escape again. During an off-site medical appointment, she slipped into a bathroom, climbed out of a window, and ran. Her freedom lasted only moments before officers tackled her to the ground. Her trial began with a mountain of evidence against her: surveillance footage of her Jeep near the crime scene, testimony from Cullen Strickland, her disappearance to Costa Rica under a false passport, and the ballistic match to her 9mm pistol. The jury took little convincing. On November 16, 2023, Caitlin Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 90 years in prison. For the friends and family of Mo Wilson, the verdict was a measure of justice, but it could never undo the loss. Mo's life, full of promise and possibility, had been cut short not by chance or misfortune, but by a calculated act of jealousy and rage.